Hello and welcome to another episode in the new Northumberland Coast series. Today we continue our journey north to the village of Low Hauxley. The small hamlet of Low Hauxley sits at the north end of Druridge Bay, and its twin village of High Hauxley sits just a little further inland from where I am now. You have to pass through High Hauxley to get here. Hauxley consists of only a handful of cottages placed either side of one street, and is only 1 mile away from the port of Amble to the north as the crow flies. However, it was still important enough to be mentioned in 2 charters in England's medieval history. Robert de Mowbray, who took over the position of Earl of Northumberland in 1086, granted the land here to the priory at Tynemouth. Of course, you will recall from the Castle series that the Earl led a rebellion against William Rufus, the then king, son of William the Conqueror, in 1088, which failed. He was pardoned, but then joined with the barons of the north and led a second rebellion in 1095. Faced with defeat, the co-conspirators deserted Mowbray, leaving him to take the blame. In an act of desperation, he confiscated 4 Norwegian ships moored on the Tyne. Rufus ordered his arrest and sent an army north, where Mowbray had barricaded himself into his fortress at Bamborough Castle. After a 6-day siege, it resulted in Mowbray's arrest, and his lands were claimed by the Crown. It seems the land was given back to the priory at Tynemouth when Richard I took the throne, and further endorsed in a charter by King John in 1203. In the centuries that followed, ownership of the lands around Hauxley were passed between several wealthy families, and also the Crown, as they fell in and out of favour with the monarch of the day. The Erringtons, followed by the barons of Widrington, were the main players. The main occupation here was always fishing, and Hauxley was known particularly for fine lobsters. This income was subsidied in the summer months with the harvesting of kelp for the production of alkali, with the same technique as we discussed in the previous location at Druridge. The alkali paste from Druridge and Hauxley was taken to Warkworth harbour for export, and then down to Newcastle and Sunderland. In 1837, coal mining arrived, and a shaft was sunk at nearby Radcliffe by the Radcliffe Coal Company. Prior to that, only 16 families lived here, but after the colliery opened, that quickly grew to 160 families. By its peak, the mine was producing 850 tonnes per day, with 300 hewers. Of course, a hewer was the miner at the coal face, hewing the coal out of the ground with a pick, hence the name. The success of the mine forced the rebuilding of Warkworth Harbour to handle the coal exports south to London and across to Europe. The Radcliffe mine was closed in 1896 and superseded by the nearby Broomhill colliery. During World War II, Hauxley was given the same protection as Druridge, with rows of anti-tank blocks, scaffolding and barbed wire. The blocks have been cleverly reused here to create a seawall protection against coastal erosion. The beach is flat golden sand fringed by high dunes at the north end of the beach. It is a relatively quiet spot with not many visitors, as there are no facilities here at all. So if you plan to visit here, make sure you are totally self-sufficient. Just a mile and a quarter offshore, opposite the mouth of the River Coquet, is Coquet Island, and I think you can see it there on the horizon just behind me. Coquet Island is uninhabited in the winter, but seasonal RSPB wardens are present throughout the summer to protect the birds. The general public are not allowed on the island. However, in fine weather, boat trips from Amble Harbour sail close to the island so that you can view the birds. It is part of the Percy estate and owned by the Duke of Northumberland. The present Duke is Ralph Percy and his wife, the Duchess Jane Percy, and they reside today at the world-famous Alnwick Castle. Coquet Island is only 1 square mile in size and is run by the RSPB as a seabird sanctuary and has the only breeding colony of roseate terns in the UK. It also hosts the popular puffins as well as the Arctic and Sandwich terns. Occasionally you will see the odd seal on there too. The history of the island reaches back to prehistoric times, with archaeological finds going back to the Bronze Age and before. In 684 AD, it is recorded that St Cuthbert met Elfled. She was the sister of King Egfrid and the Abbess of Whitby on Coquet Island. During those early years of Christianity here in Northumberland, there was a small community of monks living on the island which provided perfect solitude. There is still the remains of a small medieval monastery on the island, which is now incorporated into the lighthouse walls. The lighthouse was built in 1841 and cost £3,200. The first lighthouse keeper was William Darling. He was the brother of Grace Darling. For those of you who don't know who Grace Darling was, I will talk more about her later in the series when we reach Bamborough. But for now, she was the teenager that pulled off a daring rescue and inspired the concept of the RNLI. Speaking of lifeboats, and as I mentioned earlier in episode 4, Hauxley was the recipient of one of the 3 lifeboats gifted by the Duke of Northumberland in 1852. The first lifeboat here had been moored at Amble from 1842 and was the very early design of the modified Coble idea. When the Duke commissioned the purpose-built boats in 1851, a new lifeboat was moved from Amble to Hauxley. At that time, Amble Harbour was not dredged, and the new boat made it easier to launch from the flat beach at Hauxley. The boat was pulled down to the beach by horses for launching. In 1939, at the beginning of the Second World War, Amble Harbour was dredged and the lifeboat was moved back to Amble, making a launch easier from there, and the Hauxley lifeboat station was closed. Today, the lifeboat house is a luxury residence. If you're thinking of holidaying here, most of the cottages in Low Hauxley are holiday rentals. So obviously go online and search Low Hauxley to discover those. Alternatively, there is a caravan park which is just to the south of the hamlet called Silver Cars, and it has a wildlife centre right next to it. It's an area of wetland and natural beauty, an ideal spot for nature lovers and ornithologists. Well, that's all for this location. As usual, I'll leave you with a montage of views from the area, and I'm just heading a little further north to Amble, which is our next location. So I'll see you up there in a few minutes. Well, hi again. Here we are at our next location, a mile further north from Hauxley in Amble. And so far we have travelled 12 miles along the Northumberland coast from our starting point in Blyth. Amble is only the second working port we have seen since we visited Blyth. When I last visited Amble, I said the name of the town came from a Gaelic phrase, Amble, meaning tidal inlet. That came from Wikipedia, which is renowned for being frequently inaccurate. This time I carried out a more in-depth research and investigation into the origins of the town's name. A theory put forward by the leading Swedish scholar Eilert Ekwall on English place names states that he thinks the town's name comes from the Old English Anna Bile, meaning Anna's headland. More recently, I came across a Facebook page belonging to a West Highland group called Amble, promoting Highland history and culture. To me, the similarities in the Gaelic words were too similar to ignore, so I contacted them. Their reply was that there was no record of the phrase Amble in Scottish Gaelic. So that pretty much rules out the Wikipedia idea of it meaning tidal inlet. However, Amble in Gaelic means mouth. So that phrase could quite easily have morphed from Amble to Amble. There is one other final possibility though. The name of this Facebook page, Amble, as it is pronounced, just happens to be a place on the island of Eriskay on the Outer Hebrides. The monks who settled on Coquet Island came from the island of Iona, which is an island between the Outer Hebrides and the Scottish mainland. For me, this last option has too many connections for it to be ignored and not be the real origin. So my verdict is that Amble comes from Ambala, meaning a settlement. Wherever Amble's name originated from, today it is known as Amble and a busy, thriving fishing port and tourist destination lying at the mouth of the River Coquet. Evidence has been found locally to verify the existence of prehistoric settlements here, including flint tools, pottery and burial sites. Amble followed the same fate as Hauxley in the 11th century. As I mentioned earlier, the area was confiscated by King Rufus after Robert de Mowbray's arrest and then gifted back to Tynemouth Priory in 1095 by Richard I when he took the throne. The Bishop of Durham was the head of all the monasteries and priories in the north at that time. And remember, during this period in our history, the church acted like a devolved government, wielding great power and control over the people. Even kings were influenced by the church's opinion, and it wasn't until Henry VIII that changed. The monasteries were greedy for wealth and took it in any way they could. They did business with traders abroad, and coastal priories like Tynemouth and Whitby had a distinct transport advantage, being adjacent to the sea. In 1157, Roger FitzRoger was appointed the Constable of Northumberland. He resided in the timber motte and bailey castle overlooking Amble, where Warkworth Castle stands today. He granted the rights for salt extraction from Gloucester Hill to the Abbey at Newminster at Morpeth. Around the same time, coal deposits were discovered. Both products were exported from Amble, but not in huge quantities. Most of the salt was used in the preservation of fish in the local fishing industries of the local villages. In 1309, the Bishop of Durham, Anthony Beck, sold Alnwick Castle and the surrounding lands to Henry de Percy, the first Baron, and Amble became part of the Percy family estate. During the Tudor period under Elizabeth I, an attempt was made to extract the coal and salt on an industrial scale and export it from Amble to London. The attempt failed as it proved uneconomical to transport the coal from the mines inland to the river estuary here. The river mouth was much further to the north during the Tudor period on Warkworth Beach and a lot further north than it is today. Coal export was successful from Newcastle and Sunderland because the inland mines around that area used the rivers Tyne and Wear to transport the coal down to the sea for export. In March of 1764, heavy rain caused the River Coquet to break its banks and change its course to where it is today. This would change Amble's fortunes for the better, making it possible to build a harbour in the town itself. During the late 1700s, boat building and carpentry sprang up in Amble as the need now arose and the wooden staiths on the north bank of the river were installed. By the 1800s, the Victorians brought the railways, which made transport much easier and more efficient. This allowed Amble to prosper and grow rapidly. In 1837, the Warkworth Harbour Commission was formed and plans were drawn up by John Rennie for the construction of a new harbour and breakwaters. They were completed by 1849 at a cost of £116,000. That would be in excess of £10 million in today's value. Coal staiths were built to accommodate the railway along the new docks. As the coal industry expanded and with rail links to all the local collieries in the area, Amble was able to export up to 750,000 tonnes of coal to the south and the continent each year. The boat building also prospered, and in the late 1870s, J. Harrison, a local boat builder, was the first to install an engine into the iconic Coble fishing boat. Boats are still built and repaired here today. The building behind is the boat builder I've just been telling you about, and I've only just learned now that the owner of the shipyard has just sold the land to a property developer who intends to put more quayside apartments on it. So that basically means the end of an era here in Amble for boat building, which is very, very sad. It means now that any boats needing repair either have to go south to Whitby, which still has a boat building yard, or well over the border into Scotland. So as I say, the end of an era for Amble. Amble too had its moment in World War II with its own tragedy. On the 1st of December 1943, a short Sterling bomber had completed its mission, dropping sea mines off the coast of Denmark. The RAF bomber was due to land at RAF Acklington, just to the south of Amble, but bad weather impeded their approach. On its second attempt, it tried to fly in low to lessen the effects of the storm, and in doing so it crashed into Cliff House Farm in Toxton. 6 of the 7 crew died, along with 5 children from the farm. In 1997, a housing estate built on the western fringes of the town have streets named after the children who perished. The RNLI installed a lifeboat here in 1842, and it was one of the modified Coble designs, which had been previously based in Blyth. During a rescue in 1841 off the coast of Blyth, the boat capsized with the loss of 10 men. Blyth got rid of it and sent it here to Amble, where it served successfully, I might add, until 1852. As we just heard when we were in Hauxley there, of course, Amble was gifted one of the 3 boats from the Duke of Northumberland's legacy. As I said earlier, in 1852, Amble Harbour had not been dredged, and the launching of this new purpose-built lifeboat would have only been possible at high tide. So the Amble lifeboat station was closed and the new boat placed at Hauxley, where we've just been. After Amble Harbour was dredged in 1939, at the start of the Second World War, the lifeboat was moved back here from Hauxley, as it was now easier to launch it from the harbour, and the Hauxley lifeboat station was closed. Today, Amble has 2 lifeboats, the Elizabeth and Leonard, which is a Shannon class lifeboat, and a D-class inshore boat called the Alf and Dora. The D-class boat we've mentioned before, but this is the first time on our journey up the coast that we've come across the Shannon class lifeboat. It's the latest design of an all-weather boat to join the RNLI fleet, and the first to be propelled by jets of water rather than propellers. It was designed and built by RNLI engineers with the latest engineering spec and technology. The Shannon class boat can be launched from a beach, a slipway, or lie afloat in a harbour. And here in Amble, that's precisely what it's doing. It's permanently moored to the harbour side, ready for immediate launch. When the mines closed in the 1960s, Amble went into a bit of a decline, similar to Blyth and Newbiggin. Since then, Amble has made a miraculous recovery with considerable investment and redevelopment. In 1994, the Amble Development Trust was established as a charity to promote redevelopment in the town, and has won several awards with its achievements. It has retained its high street with a diverse choice of traders, unlike other towns who have struggled with many boarded up shops and lack of investment. Of course, the investment has gone into tourism. In addition to Amble's High Street, these craft pods were constructed in 2015 called Amble Harbour Village. Amble has many fine eating places, predominantly seafood, but catering for other tastes too. It's extremely well known for its excellent fish and chips, and my favourite place is here at the Harbour Fish Bar. Even when I lived in Newbiggin, which has its own fish and chip shops, I would still come here for a fish supper, and in my opinion it's the best place in Northumberland. Very rarely will you find no queue here that isn't way down the street. In June of 1987, the local development trust built a marina here to generate new wealth. Over 30 years, it has grown into an unparalleled facility anywhere on the Northumberland coastline. It claims to be the friendliest port in Britain. Amble is an absolute must-see if you're planning a visit or holiday in Northumberland. Okay, well, that's it for this location. Once again, I'll leave you to admire the views, and I'm heading just a little further north, ever onward, ever upward, ever northward, and I'll see you on the other side of the River Coquet in a few minutes. Hello again. This time I am a little bit further north from Amble in Warkworth, and I'm on one of Northumberland's outstanding links golf course here at Warkworth. There are a number of golf courses which are literally unparalleled anywhere in Britain, and Warkworth is just one of them. Warkworth is slightly inland and not exactly a coastal town, but you pass through it on the coastal route north. And so I wanted to include it in the series, and it also has close links with Amble, where we've just been. The castle here at Warkworth was covered quite extensively in the series I did in 2021. So if you want to know more about the castle, please check out episode 2 of the Castles of Northumberland. It's entitled The Coastal Castles. Today, however, I wanted to focus more on the village and the beach at Warkworth. The village of Warkworth is surrounded on 3 sides by a loop in the meander of the River Recut. The mound where the medieval castle sits today has been occupied since Neolithic times and fortified from the Bronze Age onwards. It is a perfect site to control things at the river estuary, and the steep-sided hills make it very easy to defend. The name Warkworth is a derivative from the original name of Worswold, which means earthwork enclosure. The site where the present castle sits was also the site of an Anglo-Saxon fort belonging to Ceolwulf, the King of Northumbria, during the 700s. Apart from its magnificent medieval castle, Warkworth has another hidden medieval treasure, the Hermitage. A hermitage is usually a monastic type of retreat for an individual seeking spiritual enlightenment. This one was built solely so that the hermit priest who resided here could pray for the soul of the earl in the castle, so really more of a chantry than a hermitage. What is remarkable about it is that it is in part carved from the solid sandstone rock which forms the north bank of the River Recut. It was built on the instructions of Henry Percy, the first Earl of Northumberland, around 1400 AD as a private chapel. The Hermitage Chapel is just short of 6 metres long by 2 metres wide and 2 metres high. An inner chamber was where the Earl would observe the priest performing his ceremonies. The 4th Earl, also Henry Percy, was supposed to provide a supporting rearguard for King Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485, the last significant battle in the War of the Roses. But then he never showed up, which led to the king's defeat. Henry Percy was imprisoned for his desertion. The defeat of Richard, the last Plantagenet king at the Battle of Bosworth, was a defining event in British history, as his successor was Henry VII, the first of the Tudor dynasty. Henry Percy was released by the new King Henry some years later. On his release, Henry Percy installed a Thomas Barker as chaplain of the Hermitage in 1497 to remain there for life at a princely sum of 66 shillings per year. 10 shillings would be the norm for that period. He wanted his own resident priest praying for his soul each day. However, it didn't quite work out for him as he planned. He was murdered a few years later by Yorkists during a revolt against King Henry VII. In later years, the residents of the Hermitage were tenant farmers with secular and religious duties, similar to a lay preacher of today. Additional accommodation was built between the rock face and the riverbank, which was well appointed for the time. The Hermitage today is owned by English Heritage, and the only means of visiting is by crossing the river by boat from the south bank in the summer months. Please consult the English Heritage website at Warkworth Castle for details on how and when to visit. Moving down into the village itself, I would like to pause for a moment and just clarify a point I made the last time I was filming here. I described that the stone bridge here was Roman. The original bridge was Roman, and that statement was misleading. So let me put the record straight. The bridge you see today was built after 1379, after a sum of money was left for its construction by a John Cook of Newcastle upon Tyne. It is thought that Henry Percy, the first Earl of Northumberland, who lived in the castle here at that time, provided the remaining money that was required. A pillar once stood on the bridge bearing the Percy family coat of arms. The bridge sits on top of the foundations of a much earlier bridge, which I understand to be Roman. There's a great deal of uncertainty about why this second bridge was needed at all. If there are any local historians watching and know the answer to that, then please write a comment below to throw any light on the matter. Also, it would be helpful to know who John Cook was, who provided the funds for the building of this second bridge. The reason I am arguing that the original bridge was a Roman bridge is simply because of the architecture of the original foundations that this medieval bridge has been built on. They are hexagonal in shape, very similar to the Roman bridge piers at Chester's Bridge near Hexham. Anna Gray talked about this in the Hadrian's Wall film we did last year. Give it a look if you want to know more about that. The other clue is that the riverbed underneath the arches of the bridge have been paved with huge slabs of sandstone to prevent the bridge pier foundations from eroding away. This also was a Roman bridge construction practice. As I said earlier, there seems to be no clear records providing proof one way or another. I am simply applying common sense and probability. At the time the present bridge was built, Henry Percy, the first Earl, was building the Great Tower in the castle, which was to protect the approach from the south of the town. The bridge tower was built to fortify the bridge and give protection to the north approach to the town, and also to act as a gatehouse. It is almost certain a toll would have been levied for crossing the bridge. There are records to show that wardens manned the gatehouse until the 1700s. The bridge carried the main coastal route north over the River Coquet, and this road today is known as the A1068, and it carried the main traffic until the 1960s. The rule of the 3.5 metres wide roadway was that the first vehicle to reach the hump in the centre had right of way down the other side. That rule was fine while ever there were horse and carriages as the main form of transport. But of course, once the motor car became affordable to working class families, the road traffic increased dramatically, and several road rage incidents took place on the bridge between oncoming motorists. In 1965, the A1068 was rerouted over a new bridge built in parallel. The stone bridge is for pedestrian use only today and is now a Grade 2 listed building. It's also one of only 2 such gated bridges left in England, the other being in Monmouth near Gloucester. The Church of St Lawrence sits on the south bank of the River Coquet, and the building we see today was erected in 1132. The first church on this site was a wooden Anglo-Saxon chapel, possibly built during King Oswald's reign around 640 AD. King Ceolwulf gave the church and all of Warkworth to the monastery on Lindisfarne when he abdicated in 737 AD to become a monk himself. When the Danes raided Northumberland in 875 AD, the church was burned to the ground and almost all of the village residents were massacred. The church was rebuilt in stone in the early 900s. When building began on the present church in 1132, the intention was to construct a safe place for the residents to hide in the event of any future raids, as well as it being a place of worship. The walls were built extra thick and the windows sited high up. However, these protective measures did not protect the residents from the next massacre. It happened in July of 1174 AD when William the Lion, King of Scotland, attacked Alnwick with his army. While the Battle of Alnwick raged some 7 miles away, Duncad II, the Earl of Fife, attacked Warkworth with a column of the Scottish army. 300 of the Warkworth people ran to take cover in the church, only to be locked inside by the invaders and burned to death. The tower on the church was added around 1200 AD and the spire added 100 years later in the 1300s. The village had a railway station built in 1847 and part of the York, Newcastle and Berwick Railway, which was the northern section of the East Coast Main Line. It was situated out of the village to the north and west. It was closed to passengers in 1958 and then to goods freight in 1962. The village today has some amazing eating places, offering gourmet food and fine wines. Crafts and other fine gift shops also occupy the main street. There are some splendid walks along the river to the east and west, with places to park and sit by the river. A good time to visit is in early spring, as the motte or mound that the castle stands on is spectacularly covered in daffodils. When I was a child, that would be April time, but with global warming, the daffodils are now up in early March. This particular year, they seem to be at their best in the last 2 weeks in March. So hopefully, if you can get to see them, you will be well impressed. Warkworth does have an amazing beach, which stretches from the North Pier at Amble all the way north to our next destination at Alnmouth. It is accessed along a narrow road which leads off the A1068 on the north edge of the bridge. It's signposted for the caravan site and leads to a car park. A short walk over the dunes takes you to a stunning beach and clear blue seas. Well, that's all for this particular episode. Next, we're off just a little bit further north to the mouth of another river, this time the River Alne. As always, I ask if you've liked this, give it a like, subscribe if you haven't already done so, and don't forget to hit that notification icon because that's how you'll be notified of any new posts. So I look forward to seeing you up there in the next episode, but for now it's goodbye.